Sometimes you're looking for just a general, like, dungeony kind of romp. You want to kick in the door, you want to kill the monsters, you want to take their stuff, you want to level up, and then rinse and repeat. Sort of the gameplay cycle that Munchkin is designed to parody. And for that, D&D is a decent enough tool. You can get by on 5th edition with if that is your desired experience, to a point. 4th edition, I think, still does even that better. And you can attack a story on top of that as well, a sort of continuing thread of maybe, there's some overarching villain that is responsible for all the bad stuff that you're taking care of. Like that can happen. D&D is fine doing that. D&D is not that good at other things, to be honest. There's a lot of genres of storytelling out there. There's a lot of different types of games. Like, you've got your horror, you've got comedy, you've got high adventure, you've got political intrigue, you've got wartime scenarios. Are you soldiers trying to press forward in battle? There's this sort of like monster hunting investigator type genres. There's more than I can name. D&D usually doesn't do any of those other ones very well. You can add comedy into a campaign, I suppose. So I guess that's not really a genre in itself. You can tack that onto pretty much anything, and I think most people do. But what do you do when you want to run one of these other genres and you don't want to use D&D for it? Well, you find a game that does it well. Let me name a few of those. I have talked before about how much I love Legend of the Five Rings, so we're going to start there. I've been reminded of it more recently. I had a really... It's actually difficult for me to describe how good the role-playing experience is with Legend of the Five Rings. L5R is the most intense and engaging storytelling, role-playing experience I've ever had consistently. Multiple times, several times throughout this campaign that I'm running, there have been times when I am just wrapped with attention. I'm just like, I'm not even narrating anymore. I'm watching the players, or maybe I'm part of it. Maybe I'm doing this back and forth. This really intense scene, either with villains that have been built up for a while and have like deep connections to the characters' backstories, or characters that have become vulnerable because they are despairing. And one of the player characters is comforting them. This game has moved me to tears. I've literally cried about the stories that are told in this system, and this setting, and the genre that it evokes. It's such a good game. Like, if you are into political intrigue, into like investigation, if you're into social maneuvering, these kinds of things, and like, imagine Game of Thrones, slightly less bloody, but then Asian. Like, that's kind of what it is. And if that appeals to you, my goodness, you are doing a crime against yourself if you do not pick this game up and try it. It's so good. Interestingly, like, it's not a lightweight system. It is about as heavy rules-wise as D&D is, but because it is focused on other things, the combat mechanics are pretty rudimentary. It's not that they're unengaging per se, though I do have a couple of my players who think that combat is the worst part about the system. Fortunately, it just doesn't happen that much. I describe a L5R campaign as a sea of intrigue with little islands of violence, which I think is just a funny way to put it. The point is that violence doesn't happen that often. Your regular fights, your skirmishes, maybe once every 3 or 4 sessions, maybe. That's if things are going kind of poorly, actually. So if you want an intrigue focused campaign, L5R is absolutely phenomenal at it. If you want sort of action-packed heist game, Blades in the Dark is literally my favorite RPG. Just from a mechanics standpoint. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I do enjoy Legend of the Five Rings more. But that has as much to do with the setting as it does with the mechanics. Well, a lot more to do with the setting, actually. Mechanics-wise, just like as far as, systems that interact with each other in a cool and intuitive and evocative way, Blades in the Dark is my favorite RPG. So I guess I would say that Legend of the Five Rings is my favorite RPG as a player / GM. Blades in the Dark is my favorite RPG as an amateur game designer. So, yeah. I record these videos right after I eat, so I think it's stuff getting all caught up in my throat. Blades in the Dark. If you don't know what Blades in the Dark is, absolutely look it up. Like, you owe it to yourself to look this game up. It's very, very good. It is a rules-light, narrative-focused RPG about a bunch of scoundrels in a city where it is always night. There are ghosts haunting places. There's Sparkcraft creations in a sort of Victorian-era type Venice-inspired city. You are not the good guys. You are sort of trying to make your living in a town that is rife with corruption. You can't expand because the city is surrounded by a lightning barrier that keeps out ghosts and demons from the Deathlands. So there's nowhere to expand to. Everything you take, every bit of turf, every asset has to be taken from someone else, which means you're going to be making a lot of enemies along the way. Better make some friends too. It's sort of set up to do heists as the primary type of gameplay, but you can do a lot of other things too. There's assassinations, there's smuggling jobs, there's setting up buyers, like establishing connections to pawn your wares, those kinds of things. It has a faction subgame where, like, during downtime, factions are taking actions to do things in the city, and you can increase or decrease your status with different factions, and they might help you, or they might do something specifically to harm you. It's just really, really good. And the character types are so evocative. If you played any Powered by the Apocalypse games, this is not a Powered by the Apocalypse game, though it is often grouped in with them due to a similar design philosophy. It is not mechanically that similar. But if you are familiar with Powered by the Apocalypse games, you will be familiar with the idea of the playbook type character type, because they're not classes, they're like character types, archetypes, those kinds of things. Every ability in the game is cool enough to base your character on. Every one. And you end up getting several. So I recommend Blades in the Dark. I can also recommend what's another really good RPG that I like? I am a sort of casual fan of Powered by the Apocalypse games. I started with Monster of the Week, and I've also run a short Root campaign. So that's more or less my experience with Powered by the Apocalypse. It's not a perfect system, and I use the word system quite lightly because they are different systems. They're just very, very similar. This system family. They're certainly not for everyone, but they're probably worth looking at for any kind of genre of game. You should at least think, does Powered by the Apocalypse do this well? Is there a version that can do this? Oh, back up a second. Before Powered by the Apocalypse, Blades in the Dark has a few different offshoots. You've got Scum and Villainy, if you like sci-fi crimes, and you've got Band of Blades, which is quite different. Instead of being based on crimes like the other two, you are a military unit that is in retreat from an undead horde. And you've got to stay ahead of the undead, you've got to gather supplies, you've got to get back to your stronghold and warn them that the horde is coming and make your final stand. It's so cool. Only ran 2 sessions because it was immediately before COVID hit, and so the game store basically closed. We weren't able to continue the campaign, and so it died. And so that also, like that sort of trudgy kind of military campaign, and it has supernatural elements. Obviously, the undead horde. There's some supernatural elements. There's like a corruption system. It's really, really cool. I have very limited experience with that, though. I would like to try that again sometime. You've got Powered by the Apocalypse is a generic family of systems that the individual games cover a lot of ground for. Monster of the Week is a good enough game. The issue with Powered by the Apocalypse, I've found, is that scaling tends not to be that good. You want to keep your campaigns nice and tight. You want to keep them relatively short. You can't go on for like years and years like you can with a D&D campaign. Heavier systems, in my experience, tend to have better scaling. On account of the math is like quite, well, not always, but the math should be quite a bit more rigorous. There are some very prominent exceptions, but Powered by the Apocalypse games tend to kind of go off the rail. Like characters become what I would call like an unstable mixture of powerful and still, because like some things scale and some things don't. You gain abilities that can combo with each other to sometimes fully invalidate the central part of the game. And I think this is especially true in Monster of the Week, which is an early entry in the Powered by the Apocalypse family. I think probably it could use a second edition, to be honest, with these considerations in mind. I've also ran Root. Root is a fun little game. I'm actually taking a few specific aspects of Root and porting them directly into the game that I'm developing, Legends and Lore, if you haven't heard about it. The campaign that I ran of that was a little bit aimless because I was just sort of exploring the system, and I was really more interested in just like seeing how it works rather than actually running a story. And that's on me, to be honest. I should have done a little bit more work and a little bit more investment into making sure that the campaign was actually coherent, because it was a lot of episodes of just mostly unrelated adventures, which is fine. If you want to run a one-shot, some systems are better for one-shots than others. One of the best systems that I've found for one-shots is Kids on Brooms, which is the same basic system as Kids on Bikes. I have Kids on Brooms because I like fantasy stuff. You want to run a Harry Potter campaign? Kids on Brooms. It's practically like it is. It's off-brand Harry Potter is what it is. It's Harry Potter with the serial numbers filed off. And it's really good for one-shots. You can do a campaign. There are rules for campaigns and character advancement and, managing your character's class schedules. You can do that, and I have. My sister ran a Kids on Brooms campaign. It was like, 10, 12 episodes, something like that. Again, like Powered by the Apocalypse games, I think Kids on Brooms benefits from shorter, tighter campaigns because the math doesn't quite hold up once you advance too much. But it is especially good for one-shots. Characters are easy to build. They are, functional at character creation. Like, you don't need advancement to like grow into a role of some sort. You can make up a character and they are fleshed out basically as much as they're going to be. Character advancement tends to just give you better numbers. It doesn't really expand on who you are or what you do. So I can recommend that really well. And it's got a nice little step dice system that I think is pretty intuitive. It's easy to use and intuitive to new players. Let's see. What else we got? Investigation. L5R does investigation really well too. Sort of depends on what it is, what kind of investigation you're looking for. If you want like Lovecraftian investigation, you're probably looking more like Monster of the Week. If you want like, I hesitate to use the phrase true crime, L5R is that kind of investigation where like, there's been a murder. You're going to go investigate the murder. You're going to talk to witnesses. You're going to investigate the scene. There's usually a supernatural element to it as well because ghosts are a thing in the setting, and spirits, whatnot. But if you're looking for something maybe a little bit more modern, there is Call of Cthulhu. Now, here's the thing about this. I have not played Call of Cthulhu. I've heard a lot of stories about it. I have seen some people play it, and I've looked at the character sheets, and I have decided it's probably not for me, for two main reasons. One, I find D100 systems to be kind of awkward to use. I don't like them, and it is a purely aesthetic thing. Like, it's not, like, mechanically, I understand it's more or less the same thing as a D20, just more granular. I don't like them. The other thing is that Call of Cthulhu specifically seems to be a poster child for the problem that I usually see in D100 games, which is that their skill list is too big. There are too many individual skills that you can be specialized in, and it is impossible to have a well-rounded character. You kind of have to pick specific spells and specialize, or spells. You have to pick specific skills and specialize in them. Which can lead to some feel-bad situations where, like, I want a character who's kind of good at these sorts of things. I have, imagine, a background. But in order to be competent at the things that I think are important, you have to neglect possibly adjacent skills, and then you are really bad at them, like, kind of inexplicably. It's a weird way to do things, and I don't especially like it. But it is there, and I've heard a lot of people having a lot of fun with it, so I guess you could try that. What else? Genesis! I almost forgot about Genesis. So the Genesis system, formerly from Fantasy Flight and now currently published by Edge Studios, is their generic role-playing game. If you've played Star Wars with custom dice, you have played Genesis. It's the same dang game. Genesis is an excellent little system for a lot of different genres. I think it probably shines most with, like, noir type scenarios, or like, you want, it's I don't know that it does like the high octane action type games. For that, you would want something like Blades in the Dark, where, like, high action and, like, daring maneuvers is the thing. Genesis, I don't know that does it quite as well, but it does do this sort of, like, the social maneuvering and the investigation and the sort of situational awareness, because of the way that Genesis's dice work, and where they generate advantages, disadvantages, and successes and failures separately. So you can have one and not the other, or vice versa, or both, or neither. I talked previously about non-binary dice resolutions, non-binary task resolution systems, and how good they are. Genesis is like the thing you think about with that. Genesis is going to be really good, especially if you pick up one of their setting books. I have two of them. I have Shadow the Beanstalk, which is their cyber noir settings in the Android universe. Very good. I recommend that over Shadowrun and over Cyberpunk. Those are the two popular cyber settings, though they are both considered cyberpunk settings. This is, like, Fantasy Flight didn't, like, really hesitated to call it cyberpunk. It is cyber noir. For a few different reasons. It's like, I think it's splitting hairs, whatever. It's the cyber setting. I can recommend it a lot. It's a very evocative setting, very good. A lot of really deep philosophy that it explores in there. Or if you are looking for space opera, I also picked up Embers of the Imperium, which is set in the Twilight Imperium setting. If you just want sort of silly space adventures, with some politics, like deep politics. If you want to play off-brand Dune, that's Embers of the Imperium, and Genesis can do both, and I think it does them about equally well. Despite being a generic system, which I've railed against generic systems in the past, Genesis, the thing is, it markets itself as a generic system, and it's not really. It does the noir, political sort of, like, it, because I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's not as generic as they say it is, but it is very good at the things that they actually put out books for. So I think those are my top recommendations for alternate games to D&D. Now, this does not include any game that I would consider to be related to or descended from D&D. So a Lancer actually takes direct inspiration from a version of D&D. Pathfinder is a D&D clone. Let's be real about what it is. It's a D&D clone. So I'm not counting those games. Those don't even get qualified for the list. These are the non-D&D games unrelated to Dungeons and Dragons that I would recommend for different genres. Those it's like my top picks for those. Some of my favorite RPGs out there. So yeah, if you're looking to run a game and you don't want to have the D&D experience, you want to do something else, these games will deliver to you an experience that D&D basically can't. Like you can spend a lot of time hammering D&D into these shapes and maybe make it fit the slot, but it's not going to be a good time. These games are really designed to bring to you an experience that is different, and they do it really well. So I can recommend them.